Hey, what's up? Let me just do some posting. I'll leave this text up for a second here. Oh no, I lost my microphone fuzz again. Oh no. What else am I setting up here? Let's see. I want to copy this link. Duh. I'll let you guys watch me work in here. And I'll go into the chat too. Streaming. So here's the meshes, my plan, and my trees, all the meshes from the different asset packs that I've got.
It is Thursday, March 1st, 2018 at 8:06 a.m. The channel has 468 subscribers.
Zamu's taken over. You
Zamuth
guys
has
aren't
the most
using your
copper
coins.
shilling. Zamuth has watched the most.
Zamuth.
Stream running for 1 minute now.
Live stream. Should I do a poll too? Nobody answered this one yesterday. I was very disappointed. I want to see some votes here, people. It's free to vote. Where is it? Darn it. There we go.
I see a lot of folks here are interested in magic.
There are currently 1 viewers watching on YouTube.
This interest
I'm also live on Twitch.
Rather general for a long time. You might probably remember that in about 87 or 6, there came out a new version of the Holy Bible to be read in churches. And in that new edition, this new one just out, it states very firmly that 3 astrologers saw his star and came to venerate him. Now this is going to be a blow to somebody, but not much, I don't think.
So I've already applied the
it's really
biomes. I just haven't picked which meshes go on which each area. So
now, the astrologers
let's do
were
the
magi,
Nordic mountains first.
and the magi of Persia were the source of practically all of the esoteric tradition that drifted into Europe. They were very wise in many things, and their wisdom went back a long way. And among their various achievements were not only astrology and divination, but also a series of very practical discoveries and explanations that will be of service to us today. 3 forms of magic were recognized: white magic, a sort of gray-colored magic, and black magic. The magi of Persia were essentially white magicians. They used their arts and their wisdom and their skills for the service of humanity. But like most ancient nations, they had their problems. In the old days, the contact of the human being with his environment was very hazardous. There was no philosophical background to depend on, no regulated theology to lean upon. Each individual had to face the problems of life with whatever courage or insight he possessed. And early in the development of early civilizations, there came around the idea of a medicine priest. A priestly clan is perhaps best known for its part
that's
in
the
the
hill tree
development
bush. Okay,
of
that
the
tree.
American Indian structure in North America. It was recognized that there were holy people born with a peculiar gift of some kind. And these holy ones became priests. Now, they were not priests as we would know them now. They were not ordained to a ministry or something. They were priests because they could talk with the olds, or with the spirits, or they could see things that others couldn't see, or they could find out where the buffalo were. Such a one was Sitting Bull, who was a medicine priest for his entire lifetime, practically. And all that time he lived as one small tribe, and he predicted for them, and he worked with their sick, and he prepared them for their journey into the afterlife.
Very sparse.
He even went with them, according to legend, and helped them to make the crossing to that world beyond, where the campfires are in the sky, stars. The priests of that type were an absolutely essential part of civilization. They made it possible. The average person was frightened. He had no securities, no protections, and no insights. He had to depend upon something, and that something was early the medicine priest. Now, the medicine priest, in turn, had to depend upon something. He had to depend either upon the insights which he possessed within his own nature, or make use of symbols, and figures, and signs, and various talismans to enforce his beliefs or teachings. Not very long ago, we noticed in one of our prominent journals a whole page devoted to the classification of available charms that you can buy right now. These charms will do almost everything. They will help you to face the future, or they will take care of housemaid's needs. Whatever you may have, you can get a charm for it. An exposition was made in London, a survey was taken, and 40% of the London school children carried charms with them every day. Now, because we still have the uncertainty, and in these critical times, the uncertainties become more immediate. Probably we were never as troubled as we are today, even in primitive times. In those days, we didn't know enough to be troubled as we are now. But we are finding more and more that we are not able to handle the situation. We cannot cope with the skullduggery that is going on in society. And the average person, like the average primitive human being, must seek some solace, some consolation, and some source of inner strength. Out of that came the most interesting of all art, perhaps, fetish art. Art to convey to the individual a certain strength due to its own designs. The Egyptians were masters of
There are currently
art.
4 viewers watching on YouTube.
Cool.
I'm
Most
also
of the
live on
Oriental
Twitch.
people are strongly developed in it. It is to carry something, have something, say something.
Thanks for the heads up.
No words or formulas.
Oh, there it is.
Usually
Look
to
at that.
meet
I got the color.
unexpected emergencies.
I picked the different
Now,
instanced
the
material.
attainment
That
of
works.
this type of security is, of course, open to considerable psychological speculation. It's very possible that the fact that we believe in the charm
There's the
gives
other
it
bush
an
tree
efficacy.
thing. Tree
That
large,
we believe in
small,
it and we
whatever.
gain a strength
That
from our
thing?
belief.
Yeah, there we go.
We
I think it
support
needs
a
to be
weakness in our
more
own
frequent.
nature and are able to face things a little better or a little more securely than we could without this symbolical help. Now, objects around these people in old days were used for making such charms. The turquoise charms of the American and Central American Indians also
So that
drifted
looks
into Tibet and were used for all types of medical, spiritual, ethical
Of course, we're
practice.
on the side of a cliff,
We
so it's
also
kind of
noticed
stupid.
another
But
peculiarity. Nothing in its native
whatever.
state is magical. It has to have
And
something
put the
done
same
with it,
things on the
so that
snow
it
material
becomes
now.
something different. And I saw a very good example of that on Navajo Reservation. 2 little stones, about the size of a nickel each, were
So
very
just
pretty
copy
little
and paste
stones.
here.
The children played with them. But then came the time when something was necessary. A new charm had to be fashioned. So the 2 little stones were laid one on top of the other, and a loop of rawhide was put around to hold them together. Immediately they were not 2 little stones anymore. Now they had the power of the olds, the powers of the truths, the powers of the goods. By carrying that little charm around, you gain some kind of spiritual strength or consolation. You were able to face the day with greater bravery. And if it happened that you were going into battle, you felt you had a greater chance of survival. Charms of this kind and fetishes were very, very common in Europe in the days of the great Crusades.
Nice.
There were a great many pilgrims that went to the Far East, the Near East, in search of religious consolation.
Of course, I can change
All the way
which
along
plants
the
go
line there
where.
were dangers. And many of these pilgrims wore symbolic forms or figures in their hats.
I could take it so
protect
make it so that there's a different
First they began by
material
using
for the
gold or
slopier parts
silver
and just
medals
put
attached
plain
to
grass
the
there.
hat.
That's what I was thinking of.
But many
It's
of them
kind
were
of going to
held
be
up and
required just
killed
for it to
with
look
gold
right.
medals.
So the bushes
So
and
they
stuff will only
became
be on the
finally
flatter
merely paper
parts.
symbols. But if
It's
you
just
had
more
that
work.
on your
I'll
hat,
get
you
to
had a
it.
better chance of
For now,
getting
I'm
to
just
Jerusalem.
doing this all the way through.
And you probably
So,
had no
yeah,
actually
let's
better chance.
do
But
the
you
next
approach
area.
life with a greater
Ireland.
positive sense of strength.
No. Let's do
So the charm and the fetish,
Cyprus area. What is
were
it?
strength
Archipelago.
they helped us to go on and do
Archipelago.
things we did not believe to be possible. In medicine, it's the placebo. It is a little capsule of nothing but ground white
Iamescendus
flour.
slaps
If you
Iamescendus
take it,
around a
it
bit
cure
with a
all
large
kinds
trout.
of diseases that you do not have.
Not that one.
You think you have them? This helps.
Here.
Everywhere there is a magical value in the
Bio
unknown.
Village 2.
There is something that, if you can
Right.
visualize it as useful or helpful, can do wonderful things. This is the secret of holy relics. No one knows how efficacious they really are, but that they have resulted in miraculous circumstances cannot be denied. We do not know just how the
Mysterious.
healings of Lourdes and Saint-Anne de Beaupré are achieved, but certainly the belief is important. The charm, their symbolism, the prayer, and a physical action to make all these things into one pattern gives the individual a strength that he does not otherwise possess. Now, white magic in its essential form must be virtuous. White magic is that which serves without hurting. It is that which accomplishes good and is never used for any other purpose. White magic is the use of the powers of life, the powers of nature, and even the ordinary faculties of the mind for the perpetuation of constructive imagery. It is necessary, therefore, that all white magic, in order to retain its nature, must be backed by a strong moral character. This is something that has been very common throughout Asia, where most of the dedicated mendicants, the holy men, have achieved a kind of white magic by gaining complete control over their own mind.
Sorry, the
their own
saxophone
emotions,
over
and their own
I couldn't
actions.
talk.
These people, to remain white magicians, would under no conditions pervert, corrupt, or compromise the principles which the Holy Faith. Therefore, a life dedicated to certain spiritual principles gains also a strength. And this strength can be considered as magical, because it involves faculties that cannot be completely classified.
Wrong area, sorry. I'm not doing
No one
Ireland
can
yet, I'm
be
doing this
sure of
area.
what happens. But if something does happen, then in some mysterious way, an energy that resides in nature is made available
That's
to
definitely
the human
different
being.
looking.
And it is generally known and
feeling
widely
the
respected.
Greek
Her
island vibe.
dedication results in a greater interior enlightenment, the individual does perform heroic services for mankind.
I'll let that be for now.
White magic is the use of every power that we know for the service of good. It is the ability to learn but never abuse what is learned. And it is that the highest of all learning is that which is dedicated to unselfish purposes. White magic is not used to help oneself. It is assumed, however, that properly used for other purposes, it brings with it a security of the inner self. The individual who serves gradually gains the realization that a
jungle's gonna be last. I think it'll be the
divine
trippiest
power
looking.
is making
It's not gonna look like a
service
jungle,
possible.
just let you guys know.
And it is this divine
Don't look
power
forward
which then
to
becomes the leader of his life.
Cry
In
engine.
this way, we have a great
I already
many
have that in a different
very
area.
wonderful examples of dedication.
And it's not
And the fact
actually
that these
Ireland, it's just like
dedications
Fantasy
in their
Forest, you know,
turn
like
have
Ireland.
contributed tremendously to the advancement and
The
survival
apothecary
of
grass.
civilized orders and peoples. Now, in white magic, therefore, the individual must realize that the principal energy upon which he depends is not his own. The energy is within himself. It is a soul power. It is a divine energy within himself. And any use that he makes of this divine energy must be worthy of its source, the light of God and the light of truth. If this is perverted, and the individual becomes self-centered and turns these energies for the advancement of his own purposes, he goes against the statement long days.
Conveniently similar.
Others whom he could help, but himself he
I haven't
could
done the
not
trees
save.
yet either. But,
Therefore, the
okay.
individual who
That should be
uses
0.1, yes.
the
Let's see
divine
this.
power is forbidden by the law itself to use it
here.
for himself. But by using it for others, he reaps a virtue within himself. Always the motive becomes the basis of the difference between these various types of discipline.
So Irish.
If the motive is personal, the achievement is much lower and much less permanent than where it is for the service of something greater than self. Now, in the life of the average person growing up today, there is an unfortunate lack of nearly any idealistic structure capable of dominating conduct. Small children are not taught that conduct is of great importance to them. They drift along under some circumstances reasonably well. Other times,
maybe not, but
some are miserably neglected and left to develop the best they can. The condition of children today is very poor,
jungle grass.
generally speaking.
Sounds like a
On the other hand,
weird
the
drink.
individual, the parent,
Cannabis.
should
alcohol.
understand the responsibilities of his own
Jungle
office.
grass.
A parent who leaves children
Yes, it's here.
to be neglected is injuring himself far more than he
That's
could
all
possibly
grass.
do by some obvious act of delinquency. We have to use the divine powers that are given to us to serve the divine needs of our fellow men. We must use them as they were intended to be used, not to make life more comfortable for ourselves, but to make life more important for those in great need. We have today a world in great need. We have hundreds of millions of people on the verge of starvation. Therefore, it becomes particularly unfortunate in these days to use the needs, sorrows, miseries, and sufferings of other people as the basis of improving our own economic condition. This is not good white magic. White magic is also the development of the love principle. Actually, as Plato pointed out, the end of all wisdom.
Got to put the
is
cherry
to
trees out too for it to
faith.
really have
It
the
is
full
to
vibe. So the
understand
forest
the real,
shortly
deep
after.
relationship between the human being and his creator. And this relationship is divine love. And this divine love is transmitted from generation to generation and from level to level of culture to become the basis of personal and impersonal affection.
Grass is kind of covering
There
up.
is love of God, love of country, love of
Grass is
beauty,
kinda
love
silly.
of family. There are all kinds of affections, but they are all to a razor magic.
Color the grass a bit.
Love is one of the great
just-
magical powers because it transforms the individual in whom it is real. When we really love someone, we cannot abuse them, we cannot cheat them, we cannot do things to them which will be to their detriment. Therefore, love carries with it sacrifice for a cause, sacrifice for a loved person, sacrifice for love of God, sacrifice for love of country. Always love is
Swap
unselfish.
these two, maybe.
And as far as it is unselfish, it is white magic.
Actually, maybe
If
make
it
this one the
becomes selfish,
wheat.
it turns gray, and if it's selfish enough, it will turn black. But in the normal, proper way of things, it should be just a little off-white.
So the heather looks cool.
Occasionally, we
Where's the
can be
grass?
excused
Oh yeah, that
for
looks
a
better.
minor slip
That's
into
way
something
prettier.
of a personal nature, maybe a little too much so. But for the benefit
Weirder,
of the world in
foreigner
general,
looking.
a person who loves
Exotic.
truly is an asset to his world and is
These plants may be way
himself
too much.
above any discipline that he might take to improve his character. So we have now the basis of white magic: service, sacrifice, and dedication. We have the individual using the power of God for the good of man, using the mysterious resources of the universe to make life
Yeah.
happier and safer for those who live with us and for those who come after us. This means that true white magic has to be the result of a considerable internal insight. The individual must really and surely believe that the energies, resources, powers, and integrities that he possesses were given to him to use for a common cause.
The mountain.
He used
Snow,
to
I
be
mean,
better
too.
not for his own sake alone, but for the world in which he lives. And if he becomes better, his world immediately improves. There is a mysterious magic here also. The complainer always lives in a poor world. But as he rises above his own limitations and transmutes his own attitude, he suddenly finds the world is a lot better than he thought it was. Always white magic is the power to
That's
see
cool.
good and to grow and to do things more effectively for the sake of humanity in general. Now we go to the opposite end of this and see what we can do with black magic. Black magic is another factor we've had with us from the time of the Greeks, Romans, Persians, and Hindus. Black magic has always been a source of fear, a source of dread. It has controlled people by terrorizing them. It has controlled individuals by threatening them with psychic forces or for psychic disasters. At one time, I know a case in which an individual was nearly frightened to death because he belonged to an organization which he finally discovered was not what it ought to be, and he asked to resign and decided to resign.
Yeah, there
He
you
was
go.
told by a member of the organization that if he tried to resign or left them,
Okay, so let's
he
do the
would be
forest.
magically destroyed. He survived it, but it was a bad time for a while. Sorcery is also black magic. In old days, sorcery was often a black magician making a circle in the earth at the crossroads of two main highways, standing in the midst of his circle and invoking spirits with magic charms. Another favorite spot for this type of activity was the local graveyard.
I can compare the
It
size
was
of these
always
islands too.
assumed
Definitely
that
gotta make
the
it bigger.
ghosts and the spirits were available. And most of the ghosts and spirits that appear in the old books are rather unpleasant-looking
confused.
figures. Some of them are
okay,
actually
yeah.
rather
So it's
terrifying.
not loading
We
in
won't
the thing.
accept them literally. But it is also true that these spirits and these ghostly things were part of a way of controlling people. They were terrorizing many individuals.
I guess it is about
And
the
even
same
today
size.
among primitive people, or semi-primitive people, this terrorizing continues. It is the individual held from the freedom of his own life by fear, by anxiety, by the belief that someone has power to destroy him. Many years ago, in several countries, there was a form of mentalism developed in which individuals took lessons in how to influence other people's thinking. All you had to do was sit very quietly, meditate, say certain holy names, and turn the attention to this distant person whom you wish to influence, and force them to make the changes that you can cause them to make by the use of magic. That went along quite a while. Exponent did pretty well for themselves. And of course the features did very well for themselves, as they always do under those conditions. And then came the deluge. Suddenly, these people who were out influencing others realized that others could be influencing them at the same time. That was all different.
The music's perfect for this.
We wish to influence other people to do what we want, but we didn't want them to influence us to do what they want. And so that whole group of nervous breakdowns resulted, in which individuals were frightened to death that others were using on them what they had been trying to use on each other. So this gradually faded out. It wasn't so good anymore. It became obvious that all over-influence can work both ways. And when it starts to work in reverse, it loses its interest, but becomes a source of greater fear and anxiety. Black magic is represented in a heavy literature called grimoires. These are little penny productions, most of them forgeries, accredited to great teachers of the past. One is the grimoire of St. Augustine, another is the grimoire of St. Thomas Aquinas, then there is a grimoire of Aristotle. All different names of famous people have been put on books made up of funny magical
I'm trying to arrange my cat here to chill.
They don't spell anything, and in languages nobody can read, but we're supposed to carry charms for the control of spirits.
Why do you have to go right there? Like, it just wants to be in the way.
There was an infernal equivalent to the divine
I guess it's to be
hierarchy.
pet. Whoever the hands go, there the cat must be.
As this god was served by all kinds of angels and archangels and thrones and dominations and powers, so the infernal god was served by all forms of evil beings.
I don't know if this is going to work very well because they have to like grow in each other's shade and stuff.
But Mephistopheles. But anyway, these evil spirits became a hierarchy, and lessons were given in it, and in doing these things, and many famous people are believed to have signed pacts with fallen angels to have all the powers of the world for a certain length of time, and they lose their own souls. One who signed such a pact, according to pretty solid tradition at least, was Oliver Cromwell. And the pact ended on a certain day, and so did he. So that all these things are part of a great cycle of mystery. Now, black magic is dedicated to the concept of power without retribution. It is based upon the idea that it is possible for the human being to conceive and design and invent all kinds of mysterious
I don't know how populated these will be, Scott's
for unworthy purposes. It is possible for him to gather wealth by unfair action. And always with these things were little scribbles, little lines of mysterious characters in Greek or Hebrew or Senzar or Phoenician or something that nobody could read. Now this kind of brings something to mind that we don't think of very much. What are the great magical alphabets of today? Mathematics. All those formulas on the blackboards, on the institutes of technology, a mysterious abracadabra understood only by those who have been students of the subject. But out of these strange combinations of figures, numbers, various variations, come all kinds of strange things. From the studies of physics and biology and chemistry, there has developed a tremendous number of very strange and not necessarily very wonderful things.
All right, let's see what happens
Remember now that the motive is the principal factor. Where a thing is done to help mankind, it is what? Where it is done to profit only individuals,
Oh, I know why. I
or
always
is
forget this
made to
part.
damage some at the expense of others. It is black magic, regardless of whether it is on the level
Do it
of
for each of
banking
these.
or on the level of agriculture. Motive lies behind everything. If the motive is not basically good, then the individual gets into trouble. Many years ago, I was talking with a physicist from the University of Berkeley on their researches in nuclear weaponry. And I asked him how he slept at night as being part of this program. And he said very simply, he said, well, we have no responsibility. We invent, we don't use. Right. If we invent it and somebody else abuses it, it's their fault, not ours. If they want to use it for war instead of for peace, we can't help it. The possibility of preventing it in the first place
it just
never
wasn't
occurred to him. But years ago, several prominent physicists retired rather than to go on into the type of armament that is based upon those funny little figures that look almost exactly like some of the magical characters in the black magical books of the Middle Ages. So here we have now skill. We have the ability to invent. And we think of progress in terms of invention. We are so proud of landing somebody on the moon that we can hardly wait to get them on the Mercury. We are so proud of the television that we never give a thought as to what comes over it. We are very proud of the nuclear fission and all that has to do with it. Now we're gaining an inordinate pride over all these computers that we are using for one purpose or another. Nobody, however, gives any thought to the misuse of these things. Once they are invented, you can't take it back. The Egyptians and the Greeks had a lot of knowledge of these subjects, but they gave this knowledge only to initiated members of their esoteric bodies. And they held those initiates under the strongest obligation. One single slip of the tongue could cost the initiate his life if he was dedicated to the service of the temple. With antiquity, it wasn't what you discovered, it's how you used it that determined what kind of a person you are. It wasn't the fact that you were famous because you discovered something. You were famous because you contributed to the common good. That it was a better world because you had lived in it. If that's true, you had a right to have a statue in one of the present public buildings, but not simply because you discovered a better weapon with which to kill somebody else. So black magic is the abuse of knowledge, the abuse of the energies of life, the perversion of the principles of science, medicine, law, or religion. Black magic is the use of those values which are divinely available to us for purposes contrary to the will of God and the need of humanity. And where this happens is going to be trouble. There's going to be trouble because you can't break rules without hurting yourself in the long run. So here we now have a world which is largely dominated by the abuse of privilege, energy, and opportunity. We have a world made up of people who do not care what the consequences are. The only thing they want to do is to make an unreasonable profit over what they discover. Narcotics addicts are perfectly willing to buy their necessary drugs by making new addicts. They don't care. But they're laboring in a universe which is not very kindly to those types of attitudes. Somewhere the disaster happens. We cannot abuse privileges without ultimately suffering physically, morally, mentally, spiritually, and also bringing down our own civilizations in ruin. So the black magicians now probably are mostly in the field of higher learning.
Cool.
We have an occasional black magician
I don't have to go through the process of all the layers. Oh, that's just for forests.
But it doesn't amount to too much. But these great black magicians, these great economic speculators, these tremendous perverters of knowledge, these are the things that worry us. Because we are given things without being given any wisdom to use them. What have we done with these things, and why do we talk about progress? Why do we say that we are the highest intelligent creation that ever existed? Simply because we are scattering death about the world.
This is
Why do we insist upon thinking that there is no responsibility for our conduct? It may be true that the laws of the nation cannot reach us.
I have to go through all
the
the forests
universal
and
law
tweak
will
that.
not forget us. And when the time comes, it will do what is necessary to correct some of this.
There we go.
Actually, therefore, I think our main problem is to transform certain black magic into white magic, if we can. White magic is usage. White magic is direction of usage. We are not dealing in white magic when we sell to anyone who wants to buy nuclear weapons. We are only actually serving the universe where we transmute these nuclear weapons into plowshares and start using, instead of abusing, the resources of life. This is true everywhere. We are abusing the resources which have been given to us, which would be adequate for us if our own selfishness didn't destroy us. So black magic, in fact and reality, is the use of power to hurt. It is the use of position to enslave. It is to use education as an instrument of industry rather than enlightenment. It is a country which passes laws that are inappropriate to the needs of the people. And most of all, it is an example which we give to those around us of the abuse of divine privileges. Just as a neglected human being is a blot upon the memory of nature, so this constant abuse and misuse is a constant cause of sorrow and misery to all concerned. White magic is used.
Now it's not giving me the error, but I'm not seeing the trees. It might be that problem with the frickin' LODs.
Black magic
I don't.
is abuse.
Every single
And these things will
foliage
come
has
back
been
to
giving me.
roost.
I'm not
They
seeing
always
even
do.
like the
So we look around and we say, what
billboards
are all these wonderful, gracious
for it
gifts
either.
for which we are congratulating each other? Well,
Why should there be like one
actually,
tree
we do
like
not
down
need
here?
to canonize the inventor of television at the moment. Their contribution to our enlightenment is mostly pathetic and apathetic. And being what we are, most people will not support anything better because they have no background for it. And why have they no background? Education.
I feel like I'm flying around in like
selfishness.
where a pterodactyl
Our
would
whole
live.
civilization.
You ever see these books about dinosaurs when you're a kid? They're like hand-painted pictures of dinosaurs like living on the cliffs and shit. That's my go-to inspiration for the feel. And I think I pulled it off right here.
We are misusing,
But still.
knowingly.
Where are my
We know
fucking
when we're
trees?
taking narcotics. We know when we're alcoholics. But we do not realize
Like none of them are showing.
that
Maybe
there is something
do,
in
like,
us that's just getting into serious trouble. We think it'll all end at the grave.
and
And
maybe.
we'll all go to sleep with the ages and no one will know whether we ever
But I
lived or
mean,
not.
that shouldn't matter.
This is a really, to some,
Minimum
is a
layer weight,
pessimistic
maybe?
view. But to a great number, it is an optimistic view. They definitely hope that their own careers will never catch up with them. But this is a false hope. In nature, everything has its payments. Everything must be solved correctly. So we say the old black magic was the time when they created various demons, where they burned cows at the stake because they were enchanted. And there they put people up in position and sentenced them to be burned at the stake or broken on a rack, simply because they were godly old people with bad memories. All of these things were looking after the smaller crimes. There was a great puddle in Germany at one time when a cow went dry, and practically all the citizens of the community were blamed for it, and one or two actually lost their lives. All this to try to make it sound nice and ornery and even and correct.
Is that my phone?
It all is part of a strange and negative magic that has enveloped the human mind, or has tainted it with all kinds of ulterior explanations. No one has seemingly wanted to accept the simple fact we are in trouble because we deserve it. This is the last thing we want. And because we do not want to face into the causes of our own difficulties, we have developed a new
These
kind
forests
of
are
magic,
tough, man.
which we might
I feel like maybe I
term
should just take out the other forest parts and just leave the two, because the two would work.
Doing some small thing right in order to get away with something bigger that we don't want to have right. It is a partial conversion. Now, every evangelist in the olden days knew what these partial conversions were. The individual came down the sawdust track, in great humility, wailing with mishaps that were happening to him, accepting blame for everything he'd ever done, and praying for forgiveness. So he got an absolution from the missionary, and it seemed to be fine. The next year he came down the path again with exactly the same problem. I used to know some retired missionaries over here in Pomona, and some of them had actually converted the same person 10 or 15 times. The conversion never stuck because the person only got a repentance for a little while, but no basic change in nature. He didn't want to offend God, no. But he didn't think God would mind if he offended everybody else. And he was perfectly qualified to be slack in his labor, to overcharge for his products, to mismanage his home, neglect his children, and increase his bank account. This was all that counted, and that and a good religious life. But there was no good religious life under such circumstances. So the conversions didn't hold. Now there are people all over the world today who are studying various forms of mysticism, metaphysics, idealistic philosophy, Oriental doctrine, and American Indian medicine principles, all kinds of things.
What the fuck?
And the studies are good. It's not important whether anybody else agrees with us or not. The real problem is, do we really basically do the thing we believe to be right? But as the time goes on, we find that these people do have the same problems as the relapsed sinner has. Yet they keep right on studying.
Just to show
these things.
you.
That's right.
Trees over
But
here.
using what they learn is a little grimy at times. They keep right on doing the selfish thing because they must not allow a spiritual conversion to interfere with a financial career. That's just not possible. If you can make a sharp bargain, you can put a new stained glass window in some church and be regarded as virtuous. But inside of your soul, the truth is always there. The motives behind what we do make for black or white. If the motive is to show, that's wrong. If it's an apology for conduct which is not corrected afterwards, it's wrong. If it's to advance personal position, fame, get into public office, all wrong. That's why we have such poor public officials. It's because the official is judged by his academic standing or his political standing, but not by his moral insight. Unless a person is good, he'll never be a good leader. And a country or a world that depends upon bad people because they are a little smarter will be in trouble to the end. There are laws governing these matters, and these laws are immutable and immutable. So we have to begin to think in our own lives some of these things that constitute magic, the magic of hope, the magic of faith, the magic of love. These are all beautiful things, but if they are perverted, they immediately drop into black magic. The moment selfishness takes over a career, its virtues fade out. The moment the person puts his own advantage first, or tries to use something he knows and possesses to humiliate or humble some other person, all of this is used against him. So they might say, how is it used against him? After all, one of these days he's going to depart, and nobody knows where he came from, and nobody knows where he goes. And for most people, nobody cares. But the individual must prove to itself, that he does not survive, or all this thinking is not much good. If there is life after death, and the general consensus of opinion is that it is probable, there are only two ways in which we think of it, either as punishment or as reward. In black magic, the punishment is clearly shown. Every black magician must end by being dumped into the hell of his own devising. Every black magic formula, when its virtues are exhausted or its powers are limited, becomes the beginning of eternal damnation. The black magic magician doesn't labor from any false understanding. He knows that he's going to be like Faust in the story. He's going to have 20 or 25 years of the good life, and then he's going to be turned over to eternal punishment. Now, this is interesting thought. Nobody much probably care much about that today. But what about narcotics? The individual who is in drugs is going to have highs and big moments for a few years, and then he's going to become a complete wreck. And no one knows what's going to happen to him after he leaves here. He is doing everything for this one great high. Well, that is very common in black magic. The success of the moment, the wealthy marriage, the big settlement, the tremendous raise of price of values. All these things are the big highs for which nearly everyone works. Nobody
I'm a little stuck right here. I don't know why this spawner is not spawning.
When it comes to the low,
it could be anything.
The individual is assumed to gradually disappear, and we don't hear of it.
I just copied it from the other area, so it's got the same settings as it.
Of consequence. I think that the philosophies of old were much better to help people to live than the one life doctrine that we have been nourishing so arduously recently, if we nourished anything. Of course, even materialism is not generally popular. Everything is questioned. And the most common question is, where do we go from here? A lot of people hope that we don't go anywhere. But it's so possible that they could be wrong. And if they are wrong, they've made the biggest mistake of all. And this is the mistake for which very few people are prepared. Therefore, the virtuous life, not a virtue in the sense just a plain lip goodness, but a deeply integrated, dedicated life, won't do any harm if there is no immortality, and will do a great deal of good if there is immortality. Socrates pointed this out very clearly.
You like 4th edition? What do you like? I've never played it, so what's cool about 4th edition? I've just heard bad things, and I saw a few things that's kind of silly, but I can see how it would be a cool game on its own right.
A lot depends on what we think about that. I would say, generally speaking, that the average person is not really in very good condition to pass on with his present attitudes. Something has to be done about them. Now, the point of value is that whatever he does that improves him now. He doesn't have to wait till he's dead to get his reward. Integrities enrich character here and now, and the absence of them is the cause of constant consternation and dismay. Therefore, white magic is something we should all definitely try to contemplate and cultivate. White magic is the individual using the divine powers bestowed upon him by an infinite life for the glory of that life, for the good of all creatures, and for the fulfillment of the daily purpose of human existence. We are here to do things that are worth doing, and whether we're remembered for them is not important. The thing that is important is the growth we make within ourselves. White magic is the basis of growth, and black magic is the basis of decay. That which neglects to grow falls behind. That which does not become better must inevitably become worse. So we have a span of years like the mystery temples and schools of antiquity. We are all being initiated into a universal wisdom. It is around the corner. We have carefully avoided it. Why? Because it interferes with human purpose. Our whole idea of greatness was in terms of architecture and statuary. We wanted to have a statue in the Forum, and someone said to one of the Roman emperors, why is your statue not in the Forum? He said, well, I think I would rather that people ask why my statue is not in the Forum than ask why it is. And that's a good answer to a good question. But we are all interested in things that are not permanent. We all hope to get the house paid for before we go. We all hope to leave something to the children. We all do all kinds of things, but we do not really plan a life. We do not make a way of growth. We do not make sure that children are worthy of what we leave them. We are not sure that they will do better with what we have than we have done, which may not be very good.
The time this is taking
Everything is neglected in
making me hopeful.
principle. And where success is achieved at the expense of principle, it's black magic. And black magic is punishable, not by the courts of law, but by the divine tribunal, or rather by the actual energies themselves that are locked within the living creature. We are all of us given a certain allotment. We have a life allotment of energy to do what we can for all we can while we're here. The idea of wasting this allotment in Las Vegas or something of this kind is very unrealistic. How can we really look around us today and say that we are better than our ancestors? We have in the last 50 years caused more trouble for ourselves and each other.
It's taking a long time, like the amount of time it used to take. I don't know.
Because we have greater privileges.
I would have just frozen it.
We have greater skills. We have greater knowledge. And always the greater evil comes from the abuse of the greater good. So we are now in a very
MTSD, what do you do? Oh, there we go, there we go.
Already we begin to see the ghosts of compensation and retribution arising. We have neglected the reality.
We have trees.
And wherever this is happening, we have fallen into black magic. We are also always aware of these false leaders that have led us to punishment, that led us to death and war.
Like what?
But in our own little personal lives, we are leading ourselves in the same direction. We haven't the courage to stand up for principles.
Why did it take so long to process and then not
if
give
we
me
do
any
not stand up for right principles, we will fall under the penalties of the abuse of principles. Now, this is not punishment in the ordinary sense of the word. It is not something waiting to hurt us. It is not something that says an eye for an eye or a tooth to a tooth. It is not that at all. Compensation in this case is the inevitable reaction of action.
I can go for this and hand paint more details or do some more work with the layers. But I want my procedural forest to work. If there's a limit to how many procedural forests you can have, that would be dumb.
As a result of wrong conduct. We are here with an allotment. If we waste our substances or corrupt them, it is not a God that punishes us. It is the disintegration of our own character that punishes us. It is the fact that we become victims of habits and circumstances that are wrong. The rise of crime in the last 50 years
it's like acting
is
like
not necessarily due merely to the fact that the law courts are negligible. The rise of crime is due to the fact that more people are abusing more principles for personal greed. This is the problem. And where are the educators? Why are we so proud of the individual who can speak Mongolian, but have no time to waste on an individual who can make a constructive contribution to society? Why are we so proud of ignorance? Most of our problems today are the consequences of black magic taking over the school system. The school system is now used simply to prepare more people to make the same mistakes we are making. We are supposed to prepare individuals to perpetuate our own greed and our own thoughtlessness and our own perversity. We are creating more dummies. And as a result of that, these young people, having no education, turn around and fall into every imaginable crime, which is not because they are necessarily delinquent children, but because they have never received a proper share of the responsibilities of growing up. Now we can take this same symbolism and use it in connection with our own bodies. We can say that instead of our children,
I'm
perhaps,
gonna go compare it to this one. What's going on
about our flesh and blood.
with these forests? Why do these forests want to
We
work?
have to realize that we are responsible for the proper use of energy. There are things we can't prevent and there are things we can prevent. But in every case, the purpose of civilization is to find ways of doing it better. Now, this doesn't mean bigger computers. It does not mean bigger bombs. It means better use of constructive means to accomplish the growth of society.
There's a cry engine
We are now
area.
up to 6 billion, pretty soon
Reflective
we'll be up
ferns.
to 8 billion. And of that
Reflective
8
flat leaf
billion,
ferns, whatever
90%
the fuck that is.
will come in and go
So,
without
like,
the slightest
Getting
understanding of
great
what life is
tree
about.
placement here.
They will not understand what
These
it means
forests.
to be better. They will not
I literally just
understand
copied one of them.
that there is anything more important than cash.
I'd been doing
There is
before
no
to
way
make
of
these.
helping these people unless the civilization itself creates what the Oriental calls good karma.
It's got to be something to do with like
As
the
you
landscape
say, so
itself
shall you
not
reap.
being selected
And
or
man
visible,
is in a
or
condition
maybe I just save
where
it and
he
reload the
is
map.
able to see,
Maybe that
or
might.
should be able to see,
I don't
that
know.
he's making a mess of things. If he can't see that, he really suffers from a serious astigmatism. He knows what he is doing isn't right, but it interferes with things if he tries to change them. Most of all, it hurts him where he suffers the most, in his pocketbook. It takes away from him certain glamour. He isn't regarded with the same favor by his friends. He isn't serving as many cocktails as he used to. All these things are social adjustments which he's afraid to make. He's afraid he'll lose his job. You've got to get to the basis of the situation, and for the average person of today, the basic change must come in the only place where it can come, and that is in the home. The only chance that parents have to really lay a foundation for the lives of their children is in the first 6 or 8 years of that child's life. If it is neglected up to that point, we have another delinquent on his way to glory. Now, this is a problem you can't legislate. You can't force it. But the problem, as the early educator Comenius put it well, that the most important school in the world is at the mother's knee. As the child receives enlightenment and correction in the first years of life, so it will be. Now we're going a little further into this matter. We're beginning to realize that this example goes back beyond birth. That the child begins to take on the world the moment it exists within the mother's womb. That all habits, attitudes, and ideas of the parents will affect the child long before it is born. This prenatal influence, as it is now generally referred to, is real. And if this prenatal influence could be changed...
this wasn't the first map, though. In the first place, the one that I do have the things on.
But in
So
order
that
to
shouldn't be applying here.
the individual has to live a better life before the child is born. Has to have a better consciousness of values when it establishes a family. And all these things interfere with fun. Actually, also, this type of fun interferes with survival. So we have a lot of things to think about in the use of these mysterious psychic forces, energies, these powers which we use in the directing of magic. Magic is nothing but an actually normal process in nature. Everything is magical. The growth of a flower is magical. The singing of a beautiful song is. The creation of a great work of art. All of these things are part of a divine magic. We see that magic in the perfect formation of the wings of a butterfly. We see this in the scene by the riverside, We see it in the moving streams and in the clouds. Everything we look at, there's something beautiful, something wonderful, something significant, and even the
see those
adversities
trees
of
from over
nature
here.
are still magnificent. Even though we cannot appreciate all of them, for the most part, we live in a world that is kind to us. Having this type of world, why can't we perpetuate it?
You know what, maybe it has something to do with where it gets placed originally.
Build a civilization that is
Let's just
worthy of the
place a new
material
one.
that's been given to us to work with. Why do we have to struggle year after year to get peace between countries, or to get peace between gods? Why do we have to fight so hard to use energies which were intended and created for the purpose of contributing to beauty and well-being? Gradually, for some unknown reason hard to diagnose, we have become supremely selfish. And every selfish person falls into black magic in one way or another. Can't avoid it. Because selfishness puts our personal desires in front of all other considerations in life. And the more we do that, the more trouble we'll be in. So we can say what is gray magic now for just a few minutes. Well, gray magic is a kind of middle distance in which an individual can have a smug sense of righteousness while they're doing wrong. That they are just so perfect they can hardly stand it, but nobody can live with it. Gray magic is the realization of duty, but duty done so painfully that no one wants it done. It is actually the problem of covering a great deal of deficiency by a kind of light glamour of I did my best. I tried hard. And everyone else suffered more than I did while I was trying. So we have people who are just trying to be good and making a miserable job of it. And it also seldom if ever really cleans up a disposition. The individual trying so desperately to be good may be the worst critic in society. They're always finding something wrong with others and giving thanks they are not like others. And the others wish they were anything but what they are. So green magic is covering a deficiency without admitting it, or by passing over it lightly. The individual says, well, I can't be all bad, I pay all my bills, and I don't go in debt, or my wife and I go to church every Sunday. All these things sound as though the individual was doing pretty well, but he doesn't mention on the side that he's foreclosing a mortgage somewhere. That's just plain business, you don't count that. So that the gray magic is a person who may in some things actually behave pretty well, but is covering up something that he doesn't want to change. He doesn't want to be unselfish. He'll be a little bit unselfish. He'll buy a couple of tickets to the fireman's ball or something. But he doesn't really want to go all out for a better world.
Over here.
He wants to go all out for what he wants. And these people become more or less pacemakers. They're the ones that so-called respectable citizens copy and try to do likewise. So I say that gray magic is the covering of large faults with small virtues. It is the individual who hasn't quietly thought through his own personal attitudes towards life. He hasn't become truly honest. He's just honest enough so he won't get caught. The integrities of things are not what counts. It's to be borderline, to get as close to trouble as possible and stay out of it. This type of thing, again, is energy. And the whole thing breaks down to one thing. We have one life. We have one life power. We have one tremendous energy. We have this divinely given spark of divinity within ourselves. We are therefore stewards in the garden. We are servants in the house of the Lord. We have this tremendous gift, the gift of divinity. We are divine. We are just as surely divine as the greatest star of the most distant and remote galaxy. Everything is life, one great life. And that great life is here as available to us and to use, with many promises of world peace, of better nations, better health, less poverty, less crime, all these things that would come from doing it right. And white magic is nothing but the acceptance of the responsibility of God-given life, and that this responsibility is something we must face and we must fulfill. And sometime we will be weighed in the balance like the Egyptian in the papyrus. We shall be weighed in the balance, and we must be considered and judged to be just, to be right. And we must try in our own lives to manifest these things, because every misuse is an unescapable defect. We never get away with it. It may disappear in a mass of circumstances, and we may never see it again, but it's there. And the only way that we can do that is right is to build up our treasures where thieves cannot take them away. We will end thievery when we are rich in values that nobody can earn except ourselves, and no one can take away from us but our own compromises. So we go back and we see the old-timers. We see the magicians of old. We see the old witch doctors mumbling with their bones. We see the courts of Europe, each with a magician, to attempt to achieve what the lord of the house wants. We see everywhere a belief, and we are told now that we must be more careful and not have so many superstitions. These superstitions are not good for us. We shouldn't believe in fantastic things like astrology. Astrology is making headlines right at the moment. And you might remember Theodore Roosevelt always had his horoscope on the wall over his desk. All kinds of things like that. And we get worried about this. But we're not worrying as to where the heavy water goes. And we're not worrying properly about what is being done to end various religious confusions. God made one energy, and it's whether a Christian, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew, or a Chinese is embodied in the physical form, but that same one spark of divinity is in every living thing. And regardless of any other thought, that spark of divinity is the basis of a comradeship that can never be broken. It is the basis of an infinite understanding that must come. Maybe not right now, but it's got to come. Because there is only one life. There isn't one life for one sect and another life for another sect, nor is there a God for one sect and another sect. There are 72 names of God, but only one God. Everywhere, we must find these values that are deep enough to rescue us from the small, petty injustices that we constantly wreak upon each other. We've got to find out the facts of life. And where we pick up a dish of food to eat, this is magic. The digestive system is a mystery we can't solve very easily. We get explanations, but there's still a lot of it we don't understand. We don't understand the life in food. We know it's there. We don't understand why the alchemists, searching for the mystery of the transmutation of metals and elements, finally came to the opinion that Paracelsus held, that the digestive system of the human body is the perfect example of the transmutation of metals. All these things we have. We have all the evidence necessary to solve most of our problems. We won't understand everything, but we would be able to make such improvements as would put a world into existence that we have never thought even possible. But we just drift along, toying with the small circumstances of life, wasting time. We're not educating ourselves, we're not doing anything that we really should be doing. That is, in the majority. A few understand and are working very hard, and it's nice to know that they're increasing in number every day. But they're not a majority as yet. But we are looking forward to a new century in which other things will happen. But in order that they must happen, more people must now and here take on the responsibilities of intelligent living. to make things worthwhile is finally to gain the supreme happiness. A peaceful world in which everyone is doing the thing that he believes, everyone living well with all others, all feuds and jealousies gone, it would bring paradise to earth, and it can be done. But it will only be done when we use the divinity in ourselves to release the God in us into manifestation in the world around us. It is the God in us that must take over the management of our personal lives. And when it does so, it will share this management constructively and properly with the management of all other lives. There is no division of truth, and there is no union of error. The truth can be found always to build and increase and add. Error is forever dividing, separating, and tearing down. We can never bring error together, but we can bring one truth into manifestation. And when we do that, we will have a far better world and a better chance for the peace that we seek for. So each person in some small way, it doesn't have to be anything very startling, but each person in some way should try to realize that he is a kind of garden, and that in his heart has been sowed an immortal seed, the seed of his own glory.
There are currently 6 viewers watching on YouTube. I'm also live on Twitch.
To keep his garden weeded and take care of that seed, and make sure that the seed of truth in his own heart has a chance to grow out and manifest and bear fruit before it is completely choked out by the false values with which we are surrounding ourselves at this time. Magic is always here. Things will always be mysterious, and they can always also be wonderful. It is almost entirely up to ourselves how these things shall go.
Try changing the tree.
So I think that we do have something to realize.
Let's try changing to another,
well, shall we say,
something that I know does work.
Of magic. Magic of healing is going to gradually take the place of all the remedies and dopes with which we are afflicted now.
Sorry.
The magic of legation will find honesty and will find who is right. The magic of
like these things are
leadership
saying that it
will
has
give
to
us
be
proper government. The magic of love, enduring homes.
like if those tree types
The
didn't
right
work.
use of that with which we have been divinely endowed is white magic. It is to do that which was intended, and to be rewarded as good and faithful servants, instead of allowing ourselves to be kicked around because we reject the very values which would give us permanence. I think we have all this to think about as we come to the end of the century. We have all this to think about as we pass through the years of our own lives. The great magic is the magic of transmutation and transformation.
This one's on
And
planes.
the Rosicrucian mystics held this to be divinely true, and so did Jacob Boehme, the great German theosophist. It is that the redeeming power, the transmuting power of love will make all things well, and the poison of hate will gradually cease to dominate in human concerns. But we must change. We cannot have hate and love at the same time. In the Persian mysteries, the two great deities, Ormuzd and Ahriman, were the good and evil principle, the god and anti-god. Actually, in the mythology, they were brothers, born of the same parents, one to save and the other to destroy.
Yes,
And this peculiar symbolism goes down through most of Persian philosophy. But in the end of it all, the brother who was evil, Ahriman, comes back to his brother, almost, and bows before him, and kneels before him, and says, I now have had my fill of this. I know you are right. Therefore, I surrender my separate power and return it to you where it belongs. And it's the same thing we have. There is a seed within us.
There's probably like one tree somewhere, and it's like, okay, successfully spawned.
With the better part of ourselves. Then there is something that has to do with our appetites and our desires. Ormuzd is the better self. Ahriman is the false self. And after many incarnations and embodiments in which evil tries desperately to destroy good, well, the city of Babylon seems to rise triumphantly over the city of God as described by St. Augustine. In the end, all that is wrong comes and bows before all that is right, and says there is but one God, and that God is love. And we might as well begin pretty soon to find these things out. We consider ourselves to be educated people. We believe we know a lot, but we do not know enough yet to be truly kind in the big emergencies of life. And we do not know how to keep faith in the little things in which we could, if we only thought a little, improve our lives, strengthen our homes, and reduce many of the difficulties from which we suffer. We could end waste, we could end privation, we could end all these things if we gave the divine spark that ensouls us the right to fulfill its purposes through the personalities which we call ourselves. So with that type of thought in mind, I think maybe we can all be a little bit better magicians in transforming the negatives of life into something beautiful. A wave of the wand and the flower can bloom. And it is up to us to make sure that in our lives and hearts we are faithful servants of the Spirit in us, that internal seed which wants to grow. And until it has a chance to grow, we will never have any peace in our own lives, and nor will we have any peace in the outside world. That which was created in us flows through us into all others, and the Word that was made flesh becomes the Word that was made soul.
Let me fix these other ones too.
And that soul, it becomes a universal healer, the medicine, the hope of nations. Well, I guess that's it, folks. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to mention that at 7:30 tonight, my wife is having a meeting of the Veritas Foundation in the lecture hall here, is going to discuss many of the terms, thoughts, and ideas that are becoming more prevalent and more useful every day in building a better practical world in which to live and fulfilling the destiny for which we were intended. I thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah, there's no desert forest today. It's already got that. Okay.
So the job of the
in this particular discussion, we are going to try to make several additions to our original text, which we think will convey some new dimensions of meaning to our basic problem. In the first place, as we all realize, ancient philosophy and science derived a great deal of symbolical knowledge and insight from the study of the human body. In the function of the body itself, man was presented with an immediate and intimate mystery. And for the most part, this mystery has not been solved, even with our increasing scientific knowledge. We are able to examine the body in greater detail than ever before. We are able to understand its functions more accurately than was ever possible to ancient man. Yet the essential mysteries of the body remain, and we are still searching for those major keys by which perhaps not only can we solve bodily mysteries, but by the knowledge thus gained extend ourselves into universal mysteries. For it was long held that if we could ever understand man, we would have a key to all things that exist, inasmuch as man is bound to all other things, is derived from all other things, and in the course and extent of his existence, he moves through all states and conditions, and finds available within himself all instruments necessary for his continuing existence, growth, and unfoldment through all the states of nature, both physical and metaphysical. Realizing to some measure, therefore, the thoughtfulness that man dedicated to this mystery of the body, we can also be aware of the natural and inevitable functioning of the human mind. Man, searching for answers, uses a kind of symbolic methodology. Having discovered some small law operating somewhere, he seeks to extend it as a greater law operating elsewhere or everywhere. Thus our concepts of cosmogony, our studies of things not visible to our sensory perceptions, these involve a process of analogy by which we apply things seen to things unseen, principles recognized to principles sought for in the unfoldment of universal life. The Kabbalists conceived of man, therefore, as the little universe, and the universe as the grand man, attempting to indicate that the processes operating in the human body operate in a larger scale in space, and that all space can be traced in the mysteries of man himself. This concept not only dominated the thinking of early Western mysticism, but is part of our spiritual heritage from Asia. For the same contemplations have everywhere existed, and all our religions, philosophies, and sciences were originally influenced by these concepts of analogy. That in many instances these older analogies were correct, we now know.
That's just the names of the maps,
Other
actually.
discoveries of antiquity remain uncertain to us. They may be right, they may not be right. In some few things we believe that we have corrected the errors of the past, that certain mistakes were made,
Grass.
but we are not too sure
Desert
that our
grass.
corrections are correct,
Swamp grass.
and
It's
we
not
may
even,
still have to go further.
the names here are the same.
And the tendency of this further consideration has been to bring us back to the most original and ancient findings.
They have the different grasses on them, though.
Thus there seems to be
This
in
is
man a
fucking-
faculty
oh,
of
clicked on the
truth
wrong
perception,
thing.
of truth realization, and that which man can actually
There we go.
reason out, prove to be reasonable.
Oh.
Later generations will probably
What?
prove to be factual. For reason is an instrument of fact-finding, just as surely as any technical instrument or mechanical device of the modern laboratory. It is natural that the spine, which is a sort of column supporting the entire structure of the
I'm a little
human body,
confused here.
that the spine should be early considered, that a great deal of symbolism should arise in connection with it, and that ancient man, studying the human body, should recognize that in this spinal column was a very vital and important element of man's corporeal nature. That in mysterious way this spinal column was a kind of magic wand, a rod, a staff, upon which the body was required or naturally inclined to lean. It was also that by means of which man's upright posture was assured. And it was interesting to recognize that this tall column of bones
This doesn't make any
would
sense to me.
support upon its upper end
That
the mystery of the
this doesn't
skull.
have the layers in here.
That part of man which seemed to be like a heavenly globe standing upon the height of a column in a strange wilderness of physical tissue and structure.
There it is.
Therefore, the
Interesting.
spine as the supporting instrument,
Yeah, okay, plains, then archipelago,
uniting
Ireland, and
the
jungle.
various sections of the
Okay,
body,
so this should be plains
seem to
and
bring into some common
snow.
pattern the three principal parts of the human torso.
That's where I'm getting these from.
So that
I'm getting
the
all that.
body
It's
itself,
good.
with the exception of its extremities,
Should be
was, so
plains,
to
it should be
say,
snow.
held together or brought into a pattern or harmony by means of this monumental structure of bones, flexible, magnificent in its formation, serpent-like in its flexibility, and
just be
yet
that
withal
You're
a
not going to
firm
work on
and
this
enduring
landscape for some
support,
reason.
capable of sustaining the various processes of the body with wonderful exactness, precision, and reasonable comfort. It was interesting to these ancient people that this spinal mystery seemed to bring into harmony the three principal parts of the human torso, namely the cranial, or the contents of the skull, the thoracic, or the contents of the chest, and the abdominal, or the concept or the contents of the abdominal.
I'm just gonna stick to more.
The subject for the morning has been...
There's music in the background.
How cool are the docs from Princeton I Group?
I don't know. Super cool, I hope.
We have already mentioned somewhat the problem of magnetism. But this evening, it might be well to go a little further into this subject for certain practical purposes that may ultimately have a considerable bearing upon the practice of therapy in the modern world. We are all becoming increasingly aware that what we call the science or art of medicine is coming inevitably to a dead end. This does not mean that the physician will no longer be useful, or that there will no longer be need for healing on various levels of human need. The dead end is a materialistic limitation upon the concept of therapy. It is not going to be possible to continue to lock from our consideration those
Maybe
parts
because it
of
fails
man's
that first time and it doesn't.
which are real though invisible. Nor shall we be able to indefinitely neglect an investigation of those forces around us, which though unseen, have a continuing effect upon our lives. It is astonishing that our researchers in electricity have not done more for us in terms of open research into the field of electrical energy. We are still without an adequate definition of the word electricity itself. And we are certainly without an adequate understanding of the nature and substance of this energy.
All right.
Assuming that such...
I'll do this one.
In the problem of Atlantis, I think there are a number of points that have not been generally considered. We think of Atlantis as an island, probably somewhere in the Atlantic, and probably about in the location of the present Azores Islands. But actually, Atlantis was a diffusion. If you buy a map now of the world as it is today, we can say that that is the modern
Okay, it didn't give me an error, but...
But to have a map of Atlantis, as it was in the time of its glory, you would have to have a map of the entire planet, because it was a distribution. Continents rose and fell, islands came up and went down.
But that wasn't the first landscape on this map either. I mean, far from it.
The distribution of land was far more important.
Neither was it the first landscape to have procedural forests on it. These two did too.
Problem of an island somewhere in the ocean. So we have to think of Atlantis in relationship to a complete pattern of the planet. As Plato clearly points out, the island of Poseidonis, which we now think of as Atlantis, was the last fragment of a great empire. It is the last surviving part, and is supposed to have disappeared under the ocean about 12,000 years before the Trojan War, which would make it about 15,000 years ago. Now, in connection with the problem of Atlantis, I think the next thing we have to study is the name. Plato refers to the mysterious empire as Atlantis. He probably received this name, or secured it, from Solon, who in turn had received it from the priests of the Egyptian temple at Sais. Now, the word Atlantis, or its root, is not Egyptian, and it is not Greek. No one seems to be able to trace the origin of the name. It appears on two very important phases of ancient mythology, Atlantis and Atlas.
I don't even know what I did. Oh, I changed this.
Atal. Now, if we look to find the language in which that word or that root is permissible or was used, we find we have to come to the Western Hemisphere, because Atal was one of the month names of the Mayas. It also has more than just a name significance. Its glyph, or its symbol, is a deluge.
What the hell?
This seems then to give us the real basis of our word, that we are dealing with a term that represents a world experience, that various countries were involved in it, that the circumstances were known around the entire planet, and that the name that has survived to us today is probably based upon the records on the Western Hemisphere.
It's about the same height of a mountain as the other continents, so...
to represent this mysterious region. We then can find from the Codex Troano, which is in the museum in Madrid, one of the surviving documents of the Mayas, that this particular deluge is marked in the glyphs of the people. The story is told in pictures, but among these pictures there is one in which the sky dragon, or the sky serpent, is pouring water from its mouth, and below this the god of death is dancing on the earth. Now, this was a long time ago, long before the coming of the Spaniards, but the records even go much further than that. According to the Chinese, the previous existence before our present coming to this earth was destroyed. The previous world was destroyed by water, a tremendous deluge. And in the I Ching, the 8 trigrams, basic trigrams,
correspond to Noah and his wife, their 3 sons and their 3 wives, were the 8 who were saved. And this is exactly what the Chinese tell us. So the story goes around here and there and everywhere. It's a very interesting story, but what does it really mean? Is it merely an archaeological curiosity, or does it have some dynamic value for us today? I would like to think of Atlantis much as Lord Bacon did in his book, The New Atlantis, in which he says in very simple terms, the new Atlantis, which is America. Bacon was quite convinced that on the Western Hemisphere, a great empire would arise, an empire that would surpass the glory of the Atlantean story, and that this new world would not be destroyed. It would not turn against the gods. It would not misuse the energies of nature, and as a result would become a new world, a restoration of the Golden Age. Now, when we study this Atlantean problem a little more carefully, we realize there have been a number of speculations on this. Vice President Dawes made quite an extensive search for the Atlantean world. A number of good archaeologists and ethnologists have devoted time to it. And the general attitude is no longer to discard it as a fable, but to try to find out what its actual meaning could be. Now let us suppose that Solon was correct, and that Solon, being an old man, was unable to do what he had intended to do, and that was to write out an account of the lost Atlantis as he found it, or it was given to him, in the caves under the Temple of Sais in Egypt. Here on columns formed of orichalcum, a metal that cannot perish, was recorded the story of a lost world. These 2 tablets are sometimes referred to as the tables.
I'm not even sure if I'm
Enoch,
getting that error,
and we
because
find a
it
great
disappears
deal
so
of
quickly.
mystical lore surrounding
It's gotta be
this
what's
story.
happening, it's just not hitting anything, but that
In
doesn't
any
make any
event,
sense.
Solon, being very old and unable to carry on the work, passed the legend on to one of his descendants who was a student of Plato's. And this student, in turn, told Plato, who took the story, to use it as a great symbolical account of the descent of man. Now, Plato does not deny that the story is literally true, but he does point out so many very subtle and unusual details that we are forced to realize that he embellished it to represent the entire story of the planet Earth and its development. According to Plato, at a remote time, the gods of high Olympus distributed the world to their various sub-deities, and to Poseidon was given the lands of the
It
sea.
could be that those layers
great
were painted
ocean,
over
the
afterwards,
islands,
but
the archipelagos.
I don't know.
And Poseidon created his
Let me
kingdom
try.
in the oceans. And he created a wonderful city called the City of the Golden Gate. And in this city there was the temple to him. And in this temple were the tablets containing the laws of life. The laws that must be obeyed if man is to survive and to enjoy the favors of the gods. And the Atlantic Empire consisted of 7 islands. These 7 islands also occur in the Mexican story. These islands came together to form a league. And this league, in turn, created a kind of empire. And in the course of ages...
I want more magic stuff. Maybe. Oh, he must talk about magic more. Magic of the astral dimension and its light.
The Manly P. Hall Archive. Ceremonial magic.
Oh god.
And source. Edge of a seething male.
No. loading.
The subject for the morning has been an object of considerable controversy. And back in the old medieval periods, there were very elaborate works dealing with magic.
Yeah, here we go.
Magic, sometimes uncertain, often unsavory in those days. Dark circles at the crossroads, haunts, various forms of black magic. All these finally gathered together under the general term of the astral light. The word itself, of course, is a perfectly innocent word. It really means essentially the effects of the stars, the convergence of star energies upon the atmosphere of the Earth. We have a feeling of what they do when they affect us. By astrology and by weather and by numerous meteorological reports, we are informed, at least in part, of starry influences. But the effect of these influences upon the Earth's subtle atmospheres became the basis of an elaborate structure in magical thinking. First of all, we have to follow the general pattern of
the grass map and the grass textures are all working fine
itself.
on it, so
we think of the planet Earth as merely as a son of balls surrounded by some atmosphere and floating in a great sea of space. This is not the way the ancients looked at it.
And this mountain is just as
tall. They considered the planet to be based upon the same general pattern as the human being himself.
That's the other one over there.
Man has a physical body and he has invisible principles operating through it. To the ancients, the Earth had invisible principles. The Earth was not merely a lump. The Earth was an organized structure. A structure that was capable of supporting life and passing through innumerable vicissitudes and changes of itself. There was not only a visible Earth, but an invisible one. There was not only a physical Earth, but there was a superphysical one. And the invisible structures of the Earth, like the aura of the human body, were energy fields. And these energy fields were involved in the evolution of everything that exists in nature. All the kingdoms of life are nourished by the energies from appropriate levels of the energy fields. A large part of magnetic healing is a result of energies being directed, either by human consciousness or by various medicinal substances which carry these energies. Therefore, the whole planet is a vast organism, a tremendous, vital, dynamic structure, of which we in our daily living see only the outside and the surface. Beneath the surface is not just simply vast strata of rocks and volcanic forces. The invisible part of the Earth is a tremendous being, for as the ancients put it, the Earth is alive. The Earth is a living thing. It is not simply a body or an object. Everything that exists in some way or other is alive. There is no death in space, but constant transformation. So the Earth itself was a being, and in the mythology of the ancients they had appropriate deities to symbolize not only the Earth but all of the separate parts of the Earth's structure. The Earth has its own mind, its own emotions, its own vitality. It not only is able to support life, but it is able to direct life. It not only brings us all the different forms of energy and life which we know in daily living, but it is behind this a conscious, rational power. Now, most people today, of course, don't believe this. Science has taken the attitude that man had the mind and the rest of nature was in existence only for man to tamper with. But this is not the way antiquity viewed it. The ancients were convinced that there was a tremendous vital power behind the physical form. Researchers on the magnetic field of the human being have justified the realization that man also is both visible and invisible. The invisible part of man is sidereal. It is an energy field. It has its own memory. It has its own records. It has its own morality and ethics. And when a human being with his mind transgresses the ethics of the magnetic field, he gets sick. Because everything in nature is constantly laboring towards an equilibrium, which will keep things as nearly in order as possible. So we look at the Earth now as a kind of world with many levels. The Egyptians did the same thing. In the old tombs there are still old diagrams showing the levels of the planet and of the solar system and of all the invisible beings that dwell therein. The Tibetans and Buddhists had the 7 heavens, and so did the Christians in the Apocalypse. All of these mysteries are now counted as merely aberrations. Well, some of them probably are aberrations, but what is an aberration? What is it that causes the individual to create fantasy? What is it that causes him to emotionalize every fact of his living? There has to be an emotional energy or he cannot do it. There has to be a mental energy or he cannot think. There has to be a vital energy or the body could not be repaired in case of sickness, and the growth of the child would be impossible. So everywhere there is life behind the scenes. Now, as soon as man began to recognize the possibility of life behind the scenes, he wanted to look at it, to find out about it, to do something with it. He was not content simply to live in a mystery. So he went to work, but unfortunately he was not well equipped for the job. The energies which he was seeking to understand were also in himself, but he had never done anything with them in himself. He had never attempted to organize his own life and bring it in harmony with the universal purpose. He was determined to take this universal purpose and force it into harmony with his own purposes. So there was a conflict here, and out of this conflict, magic was one of the byproducts. It was one of the experimental structures in which the individual was attempting to understand the energies around him, moving through him, and variously conditioning him. Among other things, he discovered that his mind could control not only visible and physical thoughts, but invisible thoughts. The mind of the individual could create thoughts. And where are thoughts? What are they? How are they born? Do they live? How do they die? Here is something that we pass over. We don't even try to explain these things. We say we had an idea one morning. Where did it come from? Was it any good? How do we know that it came from us? Did we borrow it from somebody else? And is this idea useful or useless? Is it constructive or perverse? Is it helping something or hurting something? These problems we have no way of estimating except through the old esoteric doctrines that have descended to us from minds such as Paracelsus and Pythagoras. The ancients definitely believed that the individual had a field of energy around him which could and did affect his life, that he also could poison this field with his own thinking, that he could destroy himself, and that phenomena such as drug addiction and alcoholism are aspects of the perversion of energies, that they are the sickening of the field of the imagination that surrounds the body. So we have a problem that goes back to the dawn of time as to what is imagination, how does it work, and is there a solid structure there, and how can we direct it, or how does it direct us? All this was part of ceremonial magic, became involved in the Kabbalah, and has more lately taken its place in metaphysical psychology. All of these elements, therefore, must be brought down to some level where we can use them, where we can find out what they're doing to us or what we are doing to them. At the present moment, the astral light is largely the product of what we have done to it. This field is a kind of field of the ghost world. It is the field of the invisible, but in a sense bound to the visible form of life. The Egyptians knew this ghost or phantom world. They also equated it with sleep and dreams. and believed in many cases, and perhaps correctly, that the dream life of the individual is not a mere fantasy, it is a fantasizing of something else. Anyway, we find in modern thinking there has come out of it all a kind of concept of magic. The magic of accomplishing certain purposes by dramatic intensities of the will. With magic also has come an absolutely necessary correlative, and that is ritual. Now, the Indian on the reservation here in the Southwest is a good example of a primitive magic lingering on through time. An Indian finds a little pebble. It is a nice little pebble. He puts it away to keep, but the pebble is still a pebble. But later he finds another pebble, which he likes, and he puts it side by side with the first one. He likes the combination, so he ties a thread around it and put a feather in one end, and it isn't two little rocks anymore. It is now a fetish. Now, a fetish is something that has magic power, a combination of things that is not ordinary. Things in their ordinary states are not fetishes, but when they are put into an extraordinary relationship with themselves or each other, then they gain magical influence. And the two little stones that would have done nothing in their natural state suddenly may have the power of life and death in the mind of the Indian who had created a fetish from them. This is another aspect of the same thing as the so-called ghost and dance and mask rites of ancient peoples. We have an exhibit in the library here now of the sacred masks of the Southwest American Indians. The Indian is perfectly aware of the fact that the mask is made by himself. He is perfectly aware of the fact that when he is wearing it, he is still himself. But when he combines the mask with himself, something happens. While he is wearing this mask, the astral light has stepped into his consciousness. Magic. He is no longer simply a member of the tribe. He is now some kind of a strange being conjured up by sorcery, conjured up by imagination, by ritual, rite, and symbol.
Yeah, I'll be back online in a few. I'm just gonna go for a walk. Gotta do some stuff. Peace.